going to talk about crazy people. Crazy people in HDP. That means crazy people in our higher dimensional perception and what they mean. Now, this could be a very short video. I'm all about just direct information, just straight up. This is how you should practice life, because there's a lot of excuses and a lot of reasons and a lot of mental thinking, but until we apply philosophy into our everyday, until we apply good ideas and apply teachings that we correspond with, that we vibe with, that we resonate with, applying systems, teachings, and techniques into our everyday, and ideas, frames of thoughts, that's where the money is. That's where the growth is. That's where the abundance is. So I do make long videos, in my opinion, where I just talk and talk and talk. But really, when it comes down to simple statements, understanding the ideas, and acting with intention, applying them to your life. But it also requires listening, but listening requires silence and stillness. And so now we get into the subject of crazy people and how they serve a purpose in our life, but how we need to not only be more, we need to become more aware of what the universe is trying to tell us in our action and intention when we come across crazy people. But then also with those other things I said about stillness and listening. So the good thing is that there is no crazy person that doesn't serve a use. All crazy people, by definition of whatever you would interpret in your mind as, wow, that person's crazy, that person always serves a purpose. So to treat them as if they don't, I mean, not like literally the way you treat them, how you interact with them, but in your mind, the way you treat that energy, that depiction of life, that the earth art come to life is crazy. It's natural, and it's aberrated by all sorts of things that we pick up in society. Things that we learn, traumas, and neglect, and the neuroses that we fall victim to when we start getting into good ideas, or seemingly only projecting some kind of toxic element that exists out there in society. But then a lot of crazy people are just naturally serving their purpose, and they're very, I guess you could say, seemingly gentle and harmless. They just suffer from whatever it is that echoes in their mind, the excuse that the mind makes, whether it's subconscious or analytical. If they're intentionally doing it for attention, or they are victim to some kind of chemical imbalance, let's just say that, there are very varying degrees of stability in a crazy person, but we're just going to talk about them from the perspective of higher dimensional perception, HDP, higher dimensional perception, which is a real thing. Okay, so it could be a very insulting idea when you come across higher dimensional perception, but there are other people out there teaching it for a reason. And there's a reason why I've learned it, piece by piece, ever since I was a child. It's in my resonance field. It's not going to go away. So I focus my you can say my ninth dimensional dynamic. I focus that into these videos and expressing um, the varying degrees of higher dimensional perception and spiritual awakening. If you're not familiar with my videos, my crazy ass is Ryan, and this is the Watcher's Alchemy. Basically, I try to make it as neutral as possible, not to flaunt fancy ideas or speak words that put cues into your mind that get you to create a valence that sticks you into this reality. Because that is what separates the neuroses from the analyticals, is you have to understand that everything is a program, and everything that everybody speaks and everything we attach to, it literally has the ability to seed into your subconscious and get you to move along paths that your true self, your inner core, your true values, or maybe even your future self wouldn't necessarily choose to go down that path, so subtle as it is, which these subtleties, when they snowball in the psyche, they create what we would interpret as crazy. So that is a neurosis, or a neurosis, or a sorry a, a psychosis, neurosis, or psychosis. Forgive me. I see. I wanted to shoot this video and this random topic that I'm just intuitively channeling. I wanted to do it under this new lighting that I put in. You could probably barely see it at the top of the screen, but I put a simple strip lighting that changes color, and right now it's on white, and it's very, very early. And here in this little shed that I got here, it gets really hot during the day, so it makes it hard for me to do videos when it gets really light, because I don't have great lighting. So I'm trying to see how this works. I think it's working, but anyways, so the difference between a crazy person and a person with a broad spectrum imagination, and a vessel that channels energy, that clarifies energy. The difference between a crazy person and a person that does that is the coherency. They eventually have to be able to get to a point, and it has to somehow resonate with other spectrums of thought, more basic, fundamental spectrums of thought, and then even higher archetypal, higher meaning a little bit harder to figure out, but there are templates like astrology and ancient history, different ancient stories. These are archetypes, talking about gods, things out of the Bible, root archetypes that follow humanity and repeat themselves over and over are very valuable to the analytical mind, to the person with the higher dimensional perception. Now, these archetypes still express themselves regardless if you are being analytical in the forefront of your mind, understanding what their purpose is. That can get lost, and so that's what we would interpret as a crazy person, a person that still expresses archetypes, but in a subconscious way. So their body is basically just being animated by different programs, and their analytical mind has very little grasp of why they do this. So the the so there are crazy people with higher dimensional perception. That's the importance of stillness and silence and observation, because you have to be able to shut down what you're putting out, and listen to the world around you, and understand that even if it's hard to grasp whatever's coming out of their mouth, it's just a bunch of nonsense, it's still serves a purpose, and it's getting seeded into your subconscious. Now, you'll never ever actually have full control of that, but that's there's a purpose for that, because you're supposed to be able to analytically figure that out, because somewhere along your path there will be a billion details that are just like that one detail, and they are like a tiny little piece of the puzzle that you put to the grander picture to be able to transmute and integrate whatever that is, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, along your path to ascension, your mind heart coherence. It's something that God, something that the angels, something that Jesus Christ, or whoever it is that whatever it is that you believe in, the higher self, that guardian angel is trying to get you to put that piece of puzzle into the bigger picture so that you can transmute, or whatever the case may be, and ascend with that idea. So when we come across crazy people, I think it's very important to understand when the universe is trying to tell you to be attached to that in some way, or to just stand back and observe. Most of the time, I feel like it's just a stand back and observe. But but there are going to be times when those crazy people come into your valence, and you are going to need to act with intention or physically respond. And that is when you're going to need to understand why you are trying to develop a higher dimensional perception, because your reaction can make or break the situation with a crazy person. So this kind of gets weighty, because we can be talking about a dangerous situation, which it's very common, the dangerous situation, or we can be talking about a very, I don't want to say just outright pleasant, but it can be a very meaningful experience. So I don't want to talk about dangerous situations because that's overplayed. So just let's talk about an assertive situation. We'll just put that in there. Assertive versus meaningful. Now, I happen to have a lot of experience with crazy people, because I happen to think that, I am the king of the crazy people, when you can make sense. But so I meet a lot of crazy people, people who are a little bit not in control of that analytical function that that corresponds with their mind heart coherence, to develop stability in what is actually fear or reaction to fear, and paranoia, prejudice, programs, and then what is analytical that can observe for itself. So uh, the first instance was the meaningful one, and so I came across a homeless person that, in me doing my weekly routine of going to the beach, this homeless person was just always there, and so they're a friendly person. They came up and they asked me for like a cigarette one time, and when we cross paths, we smile, and I've known this person for like maybe like 3 years or more, that I can remember. So I get this impression after so long. Fast forward to today. After all these small little reactions, I don't ever give this person money, because they have the ability to get money themselves. They can panhandle and get lots of money. I'm a poor person, so I don't give people money. But but I've grown this feel for this person is just working very hard to work with what they have to work with. And so there's probably something, I've come to this conclusion, that there's probably something along their path that I can probably offer to them, that might shed some light on what it is they're actually trying to do, what the universe is trying to show them, using my ability subtly. So I offer them to have a grounding day, because I see that they don't have transportation. They're well kept, but they are obviously homeless, and they don't have the ability to just uh, you know, go do whatever they want and put themselves in whatever situation they want to. They have to kind of hang around the public area that they hang around, where they panhandle. And I understand how energy works. I understand that energy can be very abrasive, especially in public areas where there's many, many different types of people, many different types of energies that stick on to us. So what I did was, over the course of like maybe like a week or so, I introduced this idea. If you'd like to go to the beach, I can set you up food and hydration, and you can have a grounding day. Just be there all day in the shade with the waves, and when you come back to your normal routine, you will see that things are very much more clear and less heavy. And so I got around to the point where I hung out with this person a little bit. We went to the lake. I kind of did like a mini version of this exercise where we went to the lake and we just had a conversation over a couple cigarettes, with the water being there, and there's a couple fishermen entertaining us with pulling a couple fish out of the water, just and sitting under a beautiful old tree. So as grounded as we possibly could get, and to try to have a conversation to see where this person was in their coherency. and and so I don't want to tell too much of their story, but their story kind of reflected a person who grew up with sort of a mental disorder, a little bit of an OCD, or ADHD, probably given the wrong medications. The parents expressing narcissistic tendencies, and unawares to this homeless person who's now homeless, who's in their 40s, whose parents did not inform them, treat them right, give them enough opportunities with the resources that they had. So that's what I got out of that. That's the truth I got out of that. But all in all, this person was able to make sense. At the same time, in the things that they would say, they would trail off into stories that were obviously made up. It was kind of unusual, because it was unusual, but at the same time, it served a purpose, because my mind comprehended every single thing this person was saying, even if what they were saying was obviously made up and fantastic, a fantasy. So part of their story was mixing literally, if you know the Gnostic tale of the Sophia, she was this person was subconsciously talking about this Gnostic tale in a different version, and adding this this element of reality, where there were two homeless people that she knew, this person knew, or they, them, or whoever. Uh, they knew these two homeless people, and these two homeless people affected this person's mental capacity in such a way that now these two people were all of a sudden a part of this grander story, and they weren't just people causing harm or problem or just having regular human interactions. These the way that they them described these two people was as if they were a controlling force of evil and God and the devil, and causing some kind of divine mischief. Uh, and then it sounded just like the Sophia story, the Sophia coming down, and its energy being basically manipulated, and causing this confusion all of a sudden. And but So I'm assuming you understand the Gnostic tale of the Sophia. I'm not going to tell it because I'm horrible at telling the story, but but all of a sudden it made sense. And what I tried to express this to this person, and and they couldn't they couldn't focus in to what I was saying. And pretty much they couldn't focus into most of what I was saying. But I know that there were some subtle parts in the conversation when I spoke that understood they understood some of the context. And I got that it sunk in, and that's good because it's the deeper things. It's the deeper comprehension that matters, not so much that not so much that I get the feeling, oh, I'm teaching this person something and I'm enlightening their world. It's working with both the analytical and the subconscious. Knowing, see, this is why everything serves a purpose. This is why nothing is a coincidence. Because as long as the subconscious is there to observe what what the message is, because it is a correspondence. It is angel for angel. Basically, this person serves a purpose just like an angel energy would serve a purpose in my life, and vice versa. But they don't have to be aware of that, okay? Only I have to be aware of that. That is the purpose of HDP and ascension, okay? That is why we need to embody a higher dimensional perception, because we need to understand that these things serve a purpose. So the meaningful and beautiful nature of it, or part of it, of this crazy conversation was that I got the Gnostic tale of the Sophia, and that I understood that the certain bits and pieces that I was projecting into the subconscious was creating a blooming abundance of um, of enlightenment, of their own manifested enlightenment. You know, it's not so much what I said, because that's not going to be what stands out in their mind. It's going to be what blossoms from their subconscious. That's the important part. So having that, like we were there for like an hour. It was like an hour session, and it was very natural. They didn't have to know that it was a session and that it was benefiting them, but based on what happened afterwards, what the they never went to the beach. They never had the grounding moment. Okay, and as far as I'm concerned, they probably thought that whatever I was saying was strange, but whatever I was saying was very akin to the same content I put out on this YouTube. So so I took them back to the public place, and I did not see them for another couple days. So they, for all intents and purposes, found some sort of avenue to not have to actually be there. But I did confirm that they were okay, and they're just keeping to themselves and they're doing their thing. But but this person suffers from OCD, problem, maybe not OCD, but ADHD pretty bad. So they have a hard time staying focused or even forming plans for themselves. So I'm assuming that because I'm aware of that is what got fixed. And I have to understand the changing times too, because now, I mean, even though this is California and they're very loose about their homeless, I have to assume that it's the right timing, because now there are laws being written into place that affect the homeless population, but giving them more opportunities. So perhaps this will lead to more opportunities for this person. Okay, so that is my more meaningful story. Now I have my more assertive story, where I have to understand that the purpose is not to help this person. This person is to just kind of be a ninja, be a be a be an empathic ninja in this person's life. You know, as an empath, we understand what a person's going through, but we don't necessarily have to simp to them. We don't necessarily have to sympathize to their plight and act on intention, uh, as if they were a puppet making us act on intention in their life. So I came across a lady who I see regularly in the park when I go and I read my books in the shade. And so I'm headed out there, and all of a sudden I hear, "Sir, sir." And then right away my mind kicks in, my higher dimensional perception kicks in and goes, here is that moment where someone is going to interact with you and it's going to have meaning. Now let's see where this goes. And so, sir turned into, oh, I didn't know if you were. I did. By the way, this person was a straight up air sign, and their name, their I think this was a made up name. The name that they went by was Windy, and so Windy, uh, very flighty, came up talking very fast about how they thought that I was homeless, or in their words, in their same situation, and thought that I would want some food. And, long story short, I was like, oh, no, thank you, anyways. But so this person, in the course of like, I think it might have been like, I might have stood there for maybe 4 or 5 minutes. This person got into just about every subject you could possibly imagine. You know, they didn't talk a lot about Jesus, but they mentioned Jesus, but they also talked about mysticism. They talked about chemical imbalances. They talked a little bit, mentioned astrology. They mentioned, um, obviously, they talked about homelessness, propositions. They talked about programs for the homeless, and that's just 7 subjects. But this person did not stick to any one subject, and I literally couldn't even get a word in with this person. But they allowed me to speak. They allowed me to say a few things that came out without any ums or uhs, and without any hesitation. I was able to clarify and channel some specific phrases that were very fluid to the, the the kind of vernacular we're used to as higher dimensional beings. So I understood that I can't remember what I said. Those specific phrases came out, and there was like this awe in this person's face when they allowed me to speak at the end of that, at the end of whatever I said. So I can get that there were certain things they needed to hear, or maybe it was just the way that I was speaking that they needed to hear, and I could comprehend that the fluidity of my words, that was the purpose. Okay, so it's not what I said, because what I said wasn't getting through to this person, but the whole point is I had to kind of be able to weigh the options. There are times that the universe is going to hand me coherency, and there are times when the universe is going to hand me a lot of nonsense that I don't necessarily have to opt into. So this person, I realized that they're speaking on subjects with an opinion, and they're speaking on a subject with an opinion that isn't valid because they are not learned, they are not read, they are not researched. They are just they are just blah blah blahing into the air and not actually having a conversation. And I'm starting to wonder, like, what does this serve? What purpose does this serve me if they're not going to confirm the things I already know to be certain about the universe? Okay, I don't necessarily have to be right. I don't necessarily have to be wrong, but I don't necessarily have to put up with someone not opening a conversation. They're just talking from their one point of view, and I wasn't actually saying anything. They were bringing up all these subjects about mysticism and Christ and the Bible and all these things. I was just listening, and aside from the couple things I was able to get in, I realized this lady is actually enjoying a one-way conversation at my expense. And I realized that's fucking crazy. I'm not going to deal with that. So kindly, I offered her, I said, you know what I'm about. I set up over in the shade because she walks her dog in that park. And I told her, you see me every day. I sit in the shade and I read the book. Feel free to come over. Don't be a stranger, and we'll have a conversation. But this, all these subjects are are a bigger conversation. Now, I invite you, I maybe emphasize it 2 or 3 times, just to make sure that they understood that they are invited. But I wasn't going to just stand there and listen to them talk about all these subjects and not actually have a coherent conversation, because I literally had books in my backpack that could shed a lot of light on some of the things that they were saying, but they weren't actually opened to that. And so I asserted myself, and I was correct in my thinking that they weren't actually a conversation piece. They were a one-way NPC conversation, just blah blah blahing, but it served a purpose for me to understand where I needed to assert myself, and where I also needed to have a higher dimensional perception of what this conversation, where it was going. So, so I went and I sat in that shade, and I was right. They never came back around. I never even saw them again, which isn't normal, because they usually are standing somewhere in the park, near where I can see them in my viewpoint. And I'm guessing that's why they sit there. A lot of people do this. They could easily sit in the shade behind the tree, but they decide to sit in a way where they're facing me and that they could see me. There's something about me that stands out to people, probably my consistency, because I'm always reading in this park. And I'm very simple. I don't ever try to go up and talk to anybody. So what I get is a lot of people, mostly dudes, coming up and just being very interested and sitting somewhere and facing me and like pretending to be on their phone, but like obviously looking at me. And so crazy people and NPCs, they serve a purpose, and what that is in the moment is definitely subject to opinion based on your observation, if you're willing to be open enough to observe the purpose in your life. But shutting away and only responding out of fear or hesitation to a crazy person, an incident, that might not allow you to receive the actual message that the universe is trying to show you, because the universe is very unconditional in their messages and in its love. It doesn't have, it understands what you understand, and it responds with your emotional value, your emotional content, what you carry around with you, and you clarify in your higher dimensional perception. But it doesn't care if you're aware of it at the time or not. So you have to be very on your toes in a subtle, silent, and still way with the universe, so you can see what it's trying to show you. Because it's not always going to be forgiving. Sometimes that lesson can be a very harsh lesson. It can be a very quick and rapid, scary lesson. But if we just breathe and we understand that element of silence and stillness, we can receive this information at the same time, projecting security and stability, so that what comes into our resonant field, in our valence, when it responds to us and starts to correspond with us, this crazy person versus us, the universe will take care of that person, so that you have more safety and control, so that this person cannot get into your bubble. Now that is mastery. So that is what we're trying to get to in the HDP, the higher dimensional perception, to build more security. When the universe hands us crazy, we know exactly how to stand strong and pull out the meaning and purpose in it without succumbing to fear and hesitation. And I can keep going, but we'll end it there. All right, my name is Ryan. You've been watching The Watcher's Alchemy. I'll catch you next time.